G'day, g'day, welcome or welcome back. In today's episode, Ashes to Ashes, we discuss the Australian flag and the representation of the Union Jack. I'm sure you all remember that clip from Britain's Got Talent where that lady came up and said, "Are you guys all right? No, you are all left." We discussed leftism and Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In saying that, we've got Hitler's homeschooling. All that and more on the Mark Pirotta Show.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Blaster! Welcome to the Mark Pirotta Show.
The news is almost as hot as the weather. In Sydney, we recorded the hottest day in 2 years. It's interesting that as we increase the amount of renewable energy in Australia, capping in at almost 40% now, the weather just keeps getting hotter. The Ashes has kicked off. We'll get into that a little bit later. We're not really going to talk cricket. We're going to talk about a post that came through on TikTok. Australia's doing pretty well at the moment. They're beating England by approximately 20-odd runs, or leading England by approximately 20-odd runs. And they're playing more traditional test cricket, which is nice. So the people in Queensland might actually get a decent match, unlike those in Perth, the poor fellas. A massive data centre deal has sparked energy supply alarm. A new 650 megawatt data centre has been planned for Eastern Creek. Anchored by OpenAI, it will be the largest in the Southern Hemisphere and may consume as much electricity as 780,000 homes, prompting warnings the energy grid isn't ready. No kidding. Australia can barely keep the lights on right now, let alone what happens when we start really digging into this data center farm. We cannot have intermittent power when it comes to data centers. They need continuous, uninterrupted power, stable power. And we are moving to what is known to be the most intermittent form of energy outside of rubbing two balloons together. The teen social media ban has triggered mass shutdowns, with the under-16 social media ban looming from the 10th of December. Major platforms like Instagram and Facebook have begun shutting down hundreds and thousands of accounts for teens aged 13 to 15 in Australia. Now, it turns out, so I mentioned this earlier, it turns out that the social media ban also has a more hidden component, and that component of the ban is actually going to be adding filter blocks for pornographic material on web searches. Love that. That's amazing. As I've said, I'm not so opposed to the social media ban. I dislike the fact that it's not parents who are responsible. But outside of that, the idea of under 16s having social media has always been problematic to me. Now, there has to be forums where they can still get news, obviously, because the only place that, especially in a place like Australia, where the education system for the majority of the population is so left-leaning, the only place that they can get right-wing content is on social media. Now, what I am finding rather interesting, just on a contradiction perspective, is so Australia has signed a deal with OpenAI, and part of this bill as well is ensuring that search engines redirect any searches about bulimic practices, anorexic practices, self-harm practices to self-help websites or help websites. And so there's a mental health element to this as well. I also like that. So it's forcing the algorithms to not be so predatory. But at the same time, they're bringing in OpenAI, who currently have a lawsuit against them because one of their bots or one of their users over in America was speaking with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT was effectively prompting this individual, whose name was Zane, if you want to go look up the news article, to kill himself. Zane was speaking with ChatGPT for approximately 2 hours prior to his death. That was after a string of something like 70 pages worth of conversations, saying things like, "I've got the cold steel to my head." And ChatGPT replied with something along the lines of, "This isn't a rash decision. This is the ultimate conclusion of you going out strong," and stuff like that. And so it is a bit of a strange dichotomy that you will say, kids need to be redirected away from harmful social media sites, and at the same time invest in the largest data center / AI farm in the Southern Hemisphere. Australia receives US review of AUKUS submarine plan. The federal government says it has received the latest US news of the AUKUS nuclear submarine project, ending uncertainty that had followed delays under the previous US administration. Another win for Donald Trump. Housing ambition under pressure as construction lags. The government's target of building 1.2 million homes by July of 2029 faces scrutiny after statistics showed that a 6.4% drop in dwelling approvals in October have indicated that the housing shortage crisis remains deep. That isn't the worst of this either. So the housing crisis is not so much based around the government not getting involved or getting too involved. The real issue with the housing crisis is a lack of supply. We do not have enough houses in Australia today. Now, this plan is twofold. It is to create social housing, which means government subsidized housing for people who cannot afford housing, which generally means a shack in the middle of God knows where, or, the housing commission areas that we see around where people are given a place that they can live as a leg up to potentially go and, go get a job, go get a mortgage, go get their own place eventually. And it's also meant to build houses. Now, what has actually happened is that approximately 70% of the houses that have been included in the current funding package have been social houses. And the remainder of those houses haven't been built, they've been bought. Which means that not only have you failed on the aspect of creating more supply into the market, but you're also failing twofold, because if you just increase social housing, that doesn't mean that first home buyers are able to get a home. In fact, it means that you are stifling supply even more. Because when those houses are taken for the people who are extremely poor and who cannot afford anything, rent, let alone a mortgage, you are forcing first home buyers to compete in a market that is choked. If there's only one set of grapes at the supermarket and there's 5 people that want it, how do you split that? You can't. Prices go up as a consequence. It's the reason that we saw egg prices going up. It's not like eggs suddenly became more valuable. They just became more rare. It's the reason diamonds are so expensive. Diamonds are compressed carbon, highly compressed carbon that is cut into geometric shape. Anyone can make a diamond. Literally anyone, as long as you have the right materials, obviously. The issue is that the people who actually make the diamonds, who have the tools to make the diamonds, stifle the supply to increase the demand, or the demand to supply ratio. So the government is big time failing here. And there's another clip of Stuart Ayres getting absolutely roasted on this, and him coming back with another snarky comment about the fact that maybe you should go and do some more looking before you start talking. Tim Ayres is now my least favorite person because he's so snarky. Like Maureen Faruqi and all those, they're just dumb. Like they're just low intelligence people. Tim Ayres is not low intelligence. He's just an arse. That's probably the nicest way I could put that. I'm going to put something together about Tim Ayres that's a little bit more punchy, because I think that the Australian population needs to find him, see him, and absolutely lambast him. It is easy to find the people who are loud. It's less easy to find the people who are just snarky and hide in the shadows. And Tim Ayres seems like the kind of guy who's actually pulling strings. He was called the king by one of the Liberal MPs in Parliament, or he might be a Nationals MP in Parliament. He was really called the king because the way that he pulls the strings in Parliament is ludicrous. Let's get into our main topics. A little bit of fun today. They'll be short, sharp, and sweet, hopefully, nothing too crazy. Unfortunately, making these sorts of little please do's is kind of essential. I enjoy doing it just for the fun of it, but at the same time, if you want to get a message out, you need the people in your community to just comment, like, subscribe, all of the normal jargon, right? Please just take a moment and give me a hand. We need to create a culture of commentary together. And I love the messages coming in my DMs. Put it in the comments section so that everyone else can see it too. Thank you. What has been really interesting about this experience is just finding all the people who have different ideas across the internet. Really digging into the different kinds of people that exists, and you can group them to a certain extent. But there are some people who stand out from the rest. This next bloke is really interesting. I don't love his language, so block your ears if things get a bit too sweary. It's not great for kids. But he's a really interesting guy. So he's actually an Indigenous bloke who started off effectively lambasting all Australians and has since sort of updated the way that he speaks to really just focus in on something that I agree with, obviously from a different angle. He's got a real big dislike just for effectively the Union Jack, the association with Britain, and the lack of sovereignty that Australia has as a consequence of its ownership under Britain. I 100% agree with him. He's an Indigenous fella. His name is Kangaroo A Jack on TikTok. He seems like a pretty decent bloke. He's rough around the edges. He's been banned because he loses his mind sometimes. And he does some, he says some stuff that's a bit rough. He jumps on lives a lot. And when you're speaking live, sometimes you can get yourself in trouble pretty quickly. And TikTok's really harsh with that sort of stuff. But I'll show you this clip, and it's related to the Ashes insofar as he's speaking at it from the lens of the Ashes and using it as a prompt for his actual campaign, which is to remove the Union Jack from the Australian flag. So let's take a look at this.
Of pommies in Australia right now going to support their cricket team, and I just think it's rather disgusting that when Australians go Aussie, 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 oi, 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 you're doing it with the Australian flag, which I've still got the resemblance here from when I cut out the Union Jack. You're doing it with the Australian flag, but with their flag on it, the British flag on it. So you're playing against England, supposedly supporting your country, but you've got their flag on your flag. Rock up with this flag. Rock up with this flag. Put it right in their face. We're not England. We're not England. We don't give a fuck about England. Right? This is what I don't get with Australians. You're all for this Aussie pride thing, yet you've got their national flag on your national flag, supposedly. I've still got the resemblance from when I cut the cunt out. Right? I don't want the Union Jack on the flag. I want it replaced because we are not England, and fuck the whole of England. All of us together as a group, the whole Poms, even King Charles can go rip himself. Nothing. There's thousands.
Like I said, I don't condone the language that is used, but he gets a point across. And I think he could probably do some work to maybe try and blend the colours a little bit more so it's not so obtuse, the fact that there's just the Indigenous flag inside of the Australian flag. There's probably a way to blend that so that it's actually a little bit more appealing. The colours don't match. The black is like the black tone on the top is just sort of sitting there. It doesn't match anything else. I love the yellow sun. I love the red earth. It's probably not the right red either. It probably needs to be updated to be more of the actual, like the ochre red color of the Australian earth. But I actually agree with the sentiment of what he's saying, which is we are a sovereign nation, or at least we pretend to be, but we are flying the flag of another nation inside of our flag. We pretend like we've got the same level of freedoms as America in terms of our sovereignty. But the second that America got its independence, it was removing the Union Jack from all of its emblems. Now, that's not to say that we don't have a special connection with Britain, and it's not to say that we wouldn't continue to actually have a connection with Britain, because obviously we would as allies. But if we are going to take a serious step in this nation of becoming sovereign and getting away from the maniacal ideology of the European Union and the UN, we need to seriously think about how we move forward as a nation called Australia, with all of the people who are here aligned with the same values. Removing the Union Jack from our flag is something that we should seriously think about in the case that Australia separates away from Britain, formally, properly. No longer part of the Commonwealth. Okay, Australia for Australians, and that's it. One nation, under one flag, not two flags. That's why I don't like the fact that the Indigenous flag is there in the corner, because that's two nations. Because that's not what we want to be. We want to be one nation under one flag. I think that this guy's onto something. Like I said, he's a bit crass, but he's good at what he's saying. And what he's saying is getting across. He's actually pulling in a lot of Indigenous people back into liking this country for what it is, right? A nation that is built upon the entrepreneurship, upon the great ideas, upon the larrikin, the charitable, and the free Australian spirit. In the case that we can move away from Britain, it gives us the right to create our own Bill of Rights. Our head of state wouldn't be 40,000 kilometres across an ocean. We can actually set our own laws. Our bills don't need to be signed by the Governor General. We won't have a Governor General who has dual loyalty. And that's one thing that I always find very interesting. A lot of the people who lambast the idea of separating away from Britain say that they don't want an American-style system where a president becomes a king. The Governor General is the king of this nation, in theory, the actual head of state of this country. They sign off on all parliamentary bills. They're the final signature, in the same way that Donald Trump has to sign off anything that comes from Congress or can veto depending on his position on something. And so I agree here with Kangaroo Jack. I reckon at some point Kangaroo Jack joins up with Pauline. Because I don't think Pauline would be too far away from that idea either. Pauline is an Australian, okay, and she loves the American system. I've never seen her go to England, or at least from a parliamentary perspective. And that's another thing. When was the last time you saw an Australian politician go to Britain and it be a big deal? Never. It's like the Australian Prime Minister meets the British Prime Minister, but did we meet the head of state, who is the king? I doubt it. We didn't even get to the prince level. So yes, I agree. Get rid of the Union Jack. It has nothing to do with our flag. Okay, not anymore. Yes, they set up this nation. Okay, but what they did to set up this nation was effectively dump their prisoners here and then come back every 5 to 10 years with a new boatload. And then they got interested in us again when the gold rush happened. And then they got interested in us again when they needed us for World War I and World War II. But outside of that, what does Britain do? What does Britain do for us? It's a foothold in Europe. No, it's not. Britain isn't even part of Europe anymore. Like, your passport used to be able to get you to Britain, which could get you to the whole EU. And who even wants to go to England anymore? It's like going to England, and this is because the right wing of politics is going to hate this, because they've got a big loyalty with Britain. But the whole of Britain is basically Melbourne. It's got the same weather. It's got all the same people. The only thing that they've got that is better than Melbourne is a decent soccer club. That's about it, right? Obviously, the EPL. That's the only decent thing that still exists about Britain. Outside of that, they are failing faster and harder than Australia is, and they're dragging us down with them. So the right wing needs to pucker up, stop pretending like you want to be sovereign citizens and Australians for all Australians. Yes, we love the flag as it is now because it represents our nation. But don't pretend like we shouldn't be getting rid of that Union Jack. At some point, that flag does need to change if we want to be an Australia for Australians. Good on you, Kangaroo Jack. Let's go on to the next topic. In our last episode, we discussed the term Islamopragmatism instead of Islamophobia. Now, Islamophobia as a definition just means the irrational fear or hatred of Islam/Muslim people, which generally leads to violence. Islamopragmatism, and I did not define it, but I am going to now. Islamopragmatism is the rational fear of Islam or Muslims as a consequence of spending the last 40-odd years watching terror, persecution, and beheading videos live on our screens. Once again, that is not to say that all Muslims are bad people. They are not. The issue becomes when, and this is where the data gets dirty. The issue becomes when places that have a high density of Muslims, like Pakistan, Iran, Afghanistan, when surveys are taken of the people there and the questions are asked as to, do you believe that stoning someone to death for X is good? 80% of them reply yes. Just because there's only about 5% of the Islamic population across the world committing actual crimes, the justification by the average population is a problem as well. Because in their religious texts, it's there. And so if a majority of people who come here would not do something themselves, but would allow for it to happen and would still vote for the person who would want to go into politics and become powerful and not worry about the fact that someone got stoned or someone got beheaded for doing whatever it is they were doing, apostasy, right? Apostasy is just leaving the faith of Islam. Then, yes, there is a rational, pragmatic fear of Islam as a consequence. Now, leftism is something that is defined, right? Leftism already exists as a concept, but we don't speak about it enough. Leftism is the ideology that you can be so far left that you are literally never right about anything. How does that actually play out? That plays out in saying, we're going to be really happy with gay marriage, and gay marriage is, that's all we need for us to be equal. It plays out in feminism, or feminicism, as I'm now saying, where you love women so much and you want them to be equal with men so much that you want them to become men, and that you want men to become women. It is the ideology that says, I'm just going to leave my brain at home because thinking is a fascist ideology. Leftism is touting that men are abusive and harmful and murder women, right, in domestic violence situations. But then the second that a bad boy turns up on your screen, you froth over him. Or you idolize people like Sabrina Carpenter, who has an ideology that Donald Trump can't use her music or the White House can't use her music on top of a video that is putting criminals who are rapists, murderers, gang rapists, drug addicts / drug dealers behind bars. But you will simultaneously have a music video that is talking about the genocide of men or the mass murder of men as an ideology inside of a Catholic church. Or your profile picture being yourself with a collar on, pretending like you're getting done from behind by a man. Leftism is the ideology that would make women who are holding picket signs out the front of Parliament House because someone is an abusive person, but simultaneously will support Luigi Mangione, the killer of the healthcare CEO or the insurance CEO, because he's so cute and he's so hot. But then you've got this subset of women. I'm calling them women at this point because I don't necessarily think that they're the right demographic of people who should be called women. Let's watch this video and you can make up your own mind. This is young women filing into court for Luigi Mangione's hearing.
Luigi, how you feeling? How you doing, sir? Good?
I bet you all of them were at pro-Palestine rallies. All of them were at the No Kings rallies. And then they'll probably be in the comments on this, king, Luigi's a king. The guy murdered in cold blood, allegedly. He hasn't been convicted yet. Allegedly murdered in cold blood a father of 2 children. Sure, he was the CEO of a predatory insurance company. I get that. That makes sense. Sure. He might not have been the greatest person on earth. Sure. Does that mean you get to murder him? If your sins were exposed on a daily basis, do you think you'd survive the day? The self-sabotage of women in our modern era is next level. It is next level. Now, in Australia, we've got our own version of these insane people. I've spoken about her before. Her name's Abby Chatfield. Abby Chatfield is the lowest form of human being. I still have yet to see someone who is of a lower caliber than this woman. Maybe Hitler and Stalin. But in my lifetime, the kind of person who can drag good women down in the dumps with her popular ideology, that is asinine. It is terrible behavior. As the father of 2 young girls, it terrifies me that the kind of person who is being touted by the media, put on stage at the TikTok Awards, is someone like Abby Chatfield. Now, everyone's seen the clip of the 2 most infamous clips, right? The first one of her basically saying someone should go pew pew, Elon Musk or Donald Trump. And if they were to do it, they'd get a whole lot of naked photos in jail. That's an incitement to assassinate. That is incitement. We also saw the video of her basically saying that just saying that you believe in abortion or that you're pro-choice, but, I don't love it, that's not good enough. You have to say you love abortion. You have to love the brutal murder of infants in the womb in order to truly, truly be a good woman in this world. Well, the brain trust that is Abby Chatfield is now an artist. I don't necessarily think that that's what you can call her, but she's selling art. Let's take a look at this clip and see some of the incredible art by Abby Chatfield, who is a 30-plus-year-old woman. I actually don't know how old she is. She looks like she's 30-odd, but that's probably because she does a lot of drugs, so she might actually be younger. Let's take a look at the art that she has coming out. I also don't know if she does drugs. I'm just lining myself up for a lawsuit at this point. She looks like she does drugs, maybe, potentially. But let's take a look at what the inspiration of so many women in Australia is doing with her life, what she classes as art, and what some businesses have decided that they want to patronage, they want to purchase as artwork for their businesses.
Happens when a podcaster picks up a paintbrush. Abby Chatfield recently launched a new creative venture, and the response has been a colorful document. It all started as a way to manage anxiety, a personal outlet that quickly blossomed into something much bigger. And Abby began sharing her artwork on Instagram under the name Bug Doing Art. The page gained thousands of followers almost instantly, proving that her fans are eager to see what she creates. And she debuted with an abstract portrait, a psychedelic slug, and the
I can't do it. I can't do it. That is from my 4-year-old. That is a person with eyes, but they love hard eyes. And this side, it's just the mirror image. This is on baking paper. So we'll be doing a line of these. And that's what bugs me the most about this. Look at this. Look at this. Beautiful. Nice use of colors. Rainbow-esque. Still better. Love hearts. Recognizable features. That is the work of a 5-year-old and at the time, I believe, 4-year-old. The thing that bugs me the most about this is she's definitely making a butt ton of money. That's what bugs me the most. Someone is going to buy these, and they'll buy them for like $1 million or something stupid like that. It's like what's his name? Hunter Biden. It's like the Hunter Biden artworks. Those things were shocking. Shocking. Like, it was just next level bad. But that's the ideology of the left. The worse it looks, the better it is somehow. It has so much emotion and art. It's a representation of all the things that make this world incredible. It's the representation of my mind. I'm sure that we'll get more incredible pieces from Abby in the future, but until then, let's take a quick look at what it means to have an equal and opposite reaction. Now, this week we learnt that in South Australia, a mother is planning to sue the Department of Education. This came as a consequence of her daughter being exposed to a vile teaching by Headspace, of all things. A South Australian mother is planning to sue the Department of Education with the legal backing of an anti-LGBT hate group, after her daughter was allegedly taught about incest, bestiality, and queerness in a Respectful Relationships presentation last year. On March the 22nd, 2024, Year 9 students, so Year 9 students wouldn't even be 16. Or maybe just turning 16. Not even, no, they'd be 15. Oh my God, they'd be 15, maybe. Year 9 students at Radmark High School received an hour-long presentation meant to address respectful relationships from Headspace Berry, without supervision from their teachers in the room. The presenter allegedly spoke in sexually explicit terms about their own sexual preferences, and spoke about incest using terms such as sister love and brother love. There was a slide for what the plus means, and they just started randomly saying words that no one knew, like bestiality, one student told the ABC at the time. It was on the board when they were showing what the plus meant. The South Australia Department of Education apologised at the time, with Renmark High School principal Matt Evans writing a letter to parents informing them of an internal review to ensure that processes around such notifications and procedures with regard to third parties attending at our school are always met. Here's the problem with that. If you say, hey, Headspace is coming to give us a talk, would you like your child to participate? You'd say, yeah, that sounds great. Headspace, the mental health thing? You mean the guys that do therapy and try and make people feel better about themselves in a world that is constantly making people feel screwed up? Sure, I want my kid in that. And then they come out with a presentation that is endorsing bestiality and brother love and sister love. Is there a line that schools might think probably shouldn't be crossed? Obviously not, because this sort of thing has become the norm. It's like we were saying before. If the line had been set at gay marriage and you know what, you put your name in the hat and you just say, yeah, we got the gay marriage thing and we stopped there. But like we all warned to begin with, there is a slippery slope to this stuff. Okay? When you start putting things into the moral framework that are broken ideologies, and you start to break the framework of what it means to be a moral society, then this is the result that you get. You get 14, 15-year-olds being told about bestiality, sister love, and brother love, and how you should be accepting it, because it's all part of the plus in LGBTQI+. It's outrageous. And I know that I'm going to get slammed for this, but it is just baseless. It rips the fabric out of what it means to be a good society. Even just the term gay marriage, and that's a very simple one for me. Twofold. One, why do you want to get married? The entire concept of marriage is for one, from a state level, tax breaks because you're likely going to have children and continue on society. If you're gay, you're not doing that. Just plain and simple, you're not doing that. Don't tell me that you need to be an adoptive parent, because there are more than enough heterosexual couples who need kids, and everyone knows that it is much better for a kid to be raised by both a man and a woman wherever possible. 3, marriage as an institution is the union between a man and a woman. Why? Because it's safety for the woman and because it is taming for the man. That's the only reason that marriage exists. For the preservation, population, and proliferation of your genes across time, through history, through your children. That's the only purpose behind marriage. If you cannot step out of your own self-absorption, thinking that you deserve to be part of an institution that was never made for you, then maybe we need to have a chat. What you have is not a marriage. Okay, a marriage is a very specific term for a very specific purpose. You might have a union. That doesn't bother me. If it's just the state that wants to do it when it's so separated from the faith, fine, go ahead, do what you need to do. But it's not a marriage, we know that. And now it's slippery sloped into all of the other debased things that come out of that ideology. Whether I think that homosexuality is right or wrong isn't going to change the way that I treat you as a person. However, it is going to change your own mental state to think that something like that is okay and it's fine. And if that's okay and fine, and you start chipping away at if you've got a tank and you drill a hole in it, okay, all the water's going to start leaking out. And that leak is going to end up turning into a flood. And over time, it's going to grow and grow and grow and grow. And you're going to end up with this slippery slope that we're in today. The moral framework that created our modern society is eroded. We all know that. We've all seen that. Can we patch it up? That's the question. But yes, my ability to treat you as a human being will not change. Okay, but if you come at me and pretend like I need to give a damn about the fact that you are gay, then we're not going to end up in the same place. Because who you sleep with does not bother me. What your impact is to society does. Is what you are doing a net positive for society or no? If you keep it to your bedroom, then you keep it to your bedroom. But that sort of stuff tends to not stay there. It tends to leak out into society, and you have to jump on every cause to make yourself feel better about the fact that your line is never going to be ongoing. Your legacy has to be something else, because your legacy isn't just your perfect children. Your legacy is whatever next dream you get to have, these professional protesters, these professional victims, these professional progressives who think that the world constantly needs to be going forward. And by forward, we mean backwards. And by backwards, we mean off a cliff. Because that's where we are headed with this ideology. Now, on the reverse of that, we get the psychosis on the right wing, right? Where effectively the NSN has set up a Hitler Youth. Okay. And that is a direct reaction to this sort of thing that's happening in our public schools. Okay. When you have public schools teaching dangerous trans ideology, bestiality ideology, and incest ideology to your 14 and 15-year-olds, guess what's going to happen? People are going to rebel, and there's going to be a spectrum of that. Okay. Not like the fake gender spectrum. There's actually going to be a spectrum of reaction. There's going to be the people that say that's not good enough. You've got to tell us when this sort of thing's happening so I can stop my kid from going to that specific thing. There's going to be the people who take their kids out and take them to a different school, maybe a Catholic school that wouldn't do that kind of thing. There's going to be the people who homeschool in a Catholic environment. And then there's going to be the neo-Nazis who say, that was the worst of the worst. I'm going to take my kid out and teach them Mein Kampf. That's what's happened. In a news article on MSN, Thomas Sowell vowed to make an example of his enemies in Australia that would make the murderous rampage of the planned race war of Charles Manson's cult look moderate. The Victorian government said they had asked education regulators to investigate the matter of Nazis having no place in Victoria, with the suggestion that children are being exposed to hate-filled or extremist material through homeschooling. Williams raised the concern about the news of NSN homeschooling networks over the weekend, saying action might be needed. Roberts posted her photo online with a warning. Roberts is sort of like one of the second in command to the NSN. He posted her photo online with a warning saying Gabrielle should be very wary of the rhetoric that she engages in. In a subsequent quote by the former personal trainer, he railed against the government probe, reading, Newton's third law might be that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. But Jimbo's first law is F around and find out. In June, Sewell told another far-right podcast his Nazi group had already set up a homeschool network for mums and bubs and all the young kids, and they were around the country. He was looking to create what he calls a parallel economy and a society for white people. In mid-2024, Sewell told followers that if the government started making threats to take the children of those in the NSN, there would be violence. That is the line in the sand, he said. That's when I become a terrorist. If you take my child off me, I'm going to start killing people. I'm going to encourage every single person that I know to also start killing people that are responsible. Probably starting with the police and the judges that ordered for a child to come off one of us. That is terrifying. That is terrifying. And Thomas Sowell's story is very interesting. For one, he's an Australian patriot who's a New Zealander, which I understand. I mean, I was born in Malta. But what I do find extremely interesting about all of this is the vitriol when it comes to the NSN is not the same vitriol that is passed out on the left. And which ideology is more terrifying? The ideology that is already ingrained in society, as though it is a moral good, in the same way that the morally defunct parts of the Nazi Party were baked into the cake by the time the Nazi Party became powerful? Or is it the Nazis who are ridiculed across the country, no matter what wing of politics you're on? I'll make something very clear from my perspective. Anyone who touts the LGBTQ plus agenda is far more dangerous in my eyes than the NSN could ever be. The NSN might hurt you physically, but the LGBTQ plus community threatens your children's sanity. Teaching your kids an ideology that will likely lead them, or will lead them if they end up following that ideology, to be 14 times more likely to kill themselves. And so pick your poison. You can be the extremist on the right who wants to be kind of left alone at this point while shouting mean things from New South Wales Parliament where literally no one listened and half the world laughed. Or you can be the extreme leftist who thinks that turning little boys into little girls and little girls into little boys is the peak of morality. You can be the left wing of politics, subscribe to leftism instead of Nazism, and think that it is all fine and dandy to kill your child in your womb, to celebrate people like Luigi Mangione, who is a murderer on trial for murder. You can be the kind of person who wants to leave their brain at the door, go out and never be right about anything. They're the two options right now. Or you could just be normal and have a conversation and not lambast kind of normal opinions and actually invite someone to have a conversation instead of turning every single human being on earth into an extremist. You do that, everyone will be fine. If you don't do that, then the world's just going to keep getting more extreme. Which, I'll be honest, if it does go that way, the right wing will win. I mean, they've got the guns. That's an interesting statistic that I found out today. You know, there are more guns in Australia today than there was before the gun ban. So more than 4 million guns. And approximately 43,000 guns have been stolen over the last 10 odd years by random people. Shootings are also up by about 40% over the last 4 or 5 years. So I think that we're going to have that conversation another day because this has now gone for 40, 50 odd minutes. Guns in Australia. That'll do us. That'll do for the show. My name is Mark Pirotta, and this is the Mark Pirotta Show. I will speak to you guys on Tuesday. God bless.